Hey guys, and welcome to Youth Ministry 101. My name is Tim Messenger. I'm the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry for the Diocese of Worcester. And I just want to start off by welcoming you to this program. Thank you so much for signing up. And I'm looking forward to these next few months as we begin to unpack and prepare to launch youth ministry in our own parish communities. Before we dive into any of the content, just to start off by giving you a quick overview of the program. What is Youth Ministry 101? So I want to start off by just explain that this isn't, I wouldn't call it necessarily a class or a course. It's certainly not any type of national certification program. It's not a quick fix for youth ministry. It's not some magic youth ministry in a box. Rather, maybe the best way to describe it is if you wanted to launch a youth ministry program, what are the simple step-by-step steps that you would take to implement this program in your parish? The program is going to consist of 6 parts. The first 5 will be workshops. And then the 6th part will be a core team training over the summer. Today is session 1, which we're going to talk about creating a vision for youth ministry. And to start that off and to start every session off, we're going to begin with a scripture verse, and we're going to do what's called Lectio Divina. If you're not familiar with that, basically what Lectio Divina is it's a way to pray with scripture, allow the Word of God to seep into our minds, into our hearts, to really allow it to speak to us and inform us. And I think this will be helpful, especially in our discussion today. So I want to start off with a scripture verse from the Gospel of Matthew. So we have Matthew 28, 16 to 20 here before us. And what we're going to do is we're going to pray with this scripture. And we're going to do this by reading through it 3 different times. And each time we read it, there's going to be a different thing we're going to do after that. So in a minute, I'm going to ask you just to pause the screen on this passage and read through this verse. After the first time you read it, pick one word or short phrase that jumps out to you. You don't have to think of why it's jumping out to you, but just after you read it, what's like that first word that jumps out to you? And then I want you to take a minute to read through the passage again. The second time you read it through, take about a minute or so to pray with that word and pray with the phrases or words around it and ask God, why is he revealing this word to you? Finally, the last thing I want you to do is read it a 3rd time. And during this 3rd time, I want you to place yourself into the story. Feel what's around you, see the people that are around you, look at the face of Christ and imagine Jesus speaking directly to you. What is he saying to you through this story right here and right now? So we're going to take some time, just go back and pause the screen here on this passage, or if you have a Bible with you, you can take that out and do those simple steps, and then we'll discuss afterwards. So I know when I read this passage, there are really 2 big things that stood out to me. First of all, the context, and second, the actual words that Jesus says. So when we place ourselves into the context of this story, it's at the very end of the Gospel of Matthew, literally the last chapter and the last verses. And so we come to a place where, Jesus, he's lived his life, he's done his public ministry, he's called his apostles, he's done all the miracles, all the healings, he's died on the cross, he's rose from the dead, and now he takes his apostles out to this mountain. He's about to ascend up to heaven, and these are the last words that Jesus really speaks while he's on earth, the last thoughts, the last advice he really gives to his apostles. And so it's kind of an intimidating thing, if we place ourselves in the position of those apostles. And that may be how we feel in ministry sometimes. We have this command to go out into this world of the unknown, and the apostles were really entering into the unknown, right? There wasn't any formal church that was set up at this point. It's not like the apostles were going back to their parishes, back to their youth ministry core teams, their parish staffs. They were going out on their own, but Jesus has confidence in them. And that's another key part about this passage, is that he gives them this command, but does so in confidence, saying that he will be with them always. And so what is this command? Well, as we know in scriptures, the command is to go out and make disciples, really to enter into missionary territory. And I think when we think about youth ministry, this has to be the first thing we think about. Youth ministry really is a missionary territory. and not so much, in the same way that we think of missionaries going to other countries or on other parts of the world. But it is missionary in the sense that we are, when we're dealing with youth and doing ministry to youth, we are in a sense going to a foreign culture, not foreign in the sense of another country, but foreign in the sense of absent of God or absent of truth. The youth culture, as we know, and really culture just in general, is a culture of relativism. It's a postmodern culture where God is slowly really leaving the scene. And as Christians, as ministers to these youth, we have to go and bring the good news, the message of God. Now, I know this isn't new to anybody here. It's you can turn on the TV, you can you can look outside, you can go to your religious ed program, and you can see firsthand of how the culture is affecting our youth. But I just want to pull up some key stats here to show you guys, just to illustrate really what we're dealing with. And this isn't to start off with some doom and gloom, but just to give us a reality check in what the state is of youth, and especially once they leave high school and enter into young adulthood, what the state of our youth are. So these are just a few stats that I found online. You can, for the source of these, you can go, it's on the bottom of the screen there, but brandonvote.com. And these are from 2016, so they're a few years old, but I think they definitely have a lot of meaning, and they can really give us a good glimpse into what it means to be in missionary territory and youth ministry. So I'm not going to read all these stats to you, but I think if you look down, obviously a lot of our Americans, especially young adults, are identifying as nuns, and that's not the N-U-N, although that'd be great, but it's the N-O-N-E, which is not affiliated with any type of religion at all. Now, a staggering thing, I don't have it on this slide here, but if you were to take all the religious groups in America, and if you were to add nuns, again, N-O-N-E, nuns, as one of those religious groups, they would be the single largest religious group in America today, which is really interesting. And it's evident, we look at those next stats, 79% of former Catholics leave the church before age 23. 50% of millennials raised as Catholics, so half of all millennials who were raised Catholic no longer even identify as a Catholic today, and 7% of millennials who were raised Catholic are actively still practicing, which is crazy to think about, because when you think in our normal studies, I don't know what the latest one out there is, and it kind of varies from region to region, but it's usually about 20, maybe 25% if we're lucky, of Catholics are active, are practicing. And so when you look at that stat for millennials, it goes down drastically. And so what is that telling us about the church? What is that telling us in the direction we're going? And so again, I don't mean to bring these stats up as doom and gloom, but really as to begin our discussion, why are we seeing this? What's going on? Why is this happening? And I think there's a lot of reasons we can point to and why we're seeing some of these stats. Certainly there's the culture. We live in a postmodern relativistic culture. There's a whole breakdown of family dynamics. There's our own catechesis and evangelization. And I think this is a really important point we have to make, and especially how it relates to youth ministry. As the church has gone on, the world is constantly, as we know, changing. And the church, not so much with its teachings. The teachings are always going to stay the same. We can't change those. We can't change the content. But the method in which we deliver the message, the method in which we engage people, has to constantly be evolving and changing, or else it's going to be dry and stagnant. And the teenagers who we're trying to minister to, it's just not going to enter their heads, or most importantly, their hearts. I'll share a quick story with you. So I used to work in a parish doing junior high and high school youth ministry. And with my junior high youth ministry, we partnered up a lot with our religious ed program at the parish. And I remember as the year was coming to a close, there were a lot of 7th and 8th graders who were missing some requirements on the religious ed end. And so our DRE had asked if there were some things in youth ministry that they could use as sort of a makeup. So I said, well, we have our middle school youth group that meets on a monthly basis. We have these service projects here, and we also do a monthly Bible study. So she gave that out to all the families as some options. And just a quick thing about the Bible study, which is what a lot of them end up picking. We met a monthly Bible study for 6th through 8th graders, and typically we'd have a small group, maybe 7 or 8 kids. So the last session, we had 25 kids show up to this monthly Bible study. And what I would normally do to open up these sessions was I would do some sort of icebreaker. If there's anyone who was new, I would always have them introduce themselves, or maybe say a little bit about themselves. So obviously, this session, there were a lot of new people. And so at the beginning of the meeting, I said, okay, why don't we go around, since there's a lot of new people, and we'll say our name, our grade, and I tried to think of something really simple that I could ask them. And so I thought, and why don't you tell us your favorite book of the Bible? Thinking, there's 72 of them. Everyone's got a favorite book of the Bible. Everyone should at least know a book of the Bible. So I went to the first kid, and he was like, my name is John. I'm in 8th grade. And he had this puzzled look on his face, and he looked at me, and I said, John, what's wrong? He said, what's the first book of the Bible? And I said, it's Genesis. He said, okay, that's my favorite book. Then we went to the next person, and she was like, I'm so-and-so, I'm in 7th grade, and my favorite book is Genesis. And all the way around the circle, it was Genesis, except for, of course, like the few kids who had been coming who knew their books. There's the one kid who was like, I love Habakkuk. Not really, that'd be awesome. But most of these kids said Genesis because we know the answer. They didn't know a book of the Bible, and I found this astonishing. These 7th and 8th graders who'd been going through, several years of faith formation couldn't answer a basic question. And it wasn't because our program was lacking in content. We had a very good program, but I think it was the message in which we were trying to deliver to them. It just wasn't hitting them because it wasn't something they're interested in. And so I think youth ministry, not that we have to engage every kid and pique their interest, but we have to meet them where they are. We have to meet their needs, and that's really the goal of youth ministries: catechizing and evangelizing through meeting the needs of young people. So, what does a vision for youth ministry look like? Where do we turn to get this? I think in the church, there's not a whole lot of formal documents or encyclicals or anything like that that's specifically related to youth ministry. In fact, the one document that we really do have as a church is a USCCB document called Renewing the Vision. And so I just want to talk a little bit about that. That won't be what the majority of the session is about, but in terms of giving us some guidance in what the church does say about what youth ministry is in terms of goals and a framework, that's what Renewing the Vision really was all about. So we're going to take a second just to talk about that really quickly. So Renewing the Vision was a document written by the USCCB and published, I believe, back in 1997, as evident by the cover of the book. But there's actually a lot of great things. And yeah, the goal of it was really to provide a framework for what Catholic youth ministry is. So we're not going to go all the way through this document. I just want to highlight a few points just to start our conversation in talking about a vision for youth ministry. So two key aspects of Renewing the Vision is first, they offer three goals in if we want to do youth ministry, what are kind of the endpoints? What are those goals, those visions that we have for youth ministry? So those goals, bring those up here real quick. The first goal is to empower young people to live as disciples of Jesus Christ in our world today. Really build disciples, build young people who are on fire for their faith, who want to go out and live it out in their lives. The second goal is to draw young people into responsible participation in the life, mission, and work of the Catholic faith community. So taking this enthusiasm and to bring it into the life of our parish communities, getting young people involved in our parish communities and in our church as a whole. And then finally, the third goal is to foster the total personal and spiritual growth of each young person. So as parish, as ministers, to walk with and accompany those young people in their personal journey through life and in their spiritual journey to grow closer to God. Now, how do we do this? How do we get young people to achieve these three goals? And I think this is really the task of youth ministry. And it goes to the question, what is youth ministry? What do we mean by youth ministry? And I think that question of youth ministry, I think a lot of times parishes have an incomplete idea or understanding or implementation of youth ministry. Oftentimes not because of something wrong that a parish is doing, but because of lack of resources or personnel. So what do I mean by an incomplete model of youth ministry? Well, I think oftentimes there's a lot of different elements to youth ministry. And sometimes we'll take one of those elements and say that's what youth ministry is our parish. So an example would be, let's say you have a service group at your parish like Young Neighbors in Action, which is a wonderful program that inspires young people to do service, to serve others. But what if you took that program and said, that's our youth ministry and we don't do anything else for youth? That would be reducing it down to one thing. Or maybe you have like a social group or a social club who meets once a month for like laser tag and pizza. And that's awesome because there's like this community involvement where we're drawing youth, we're giving them a place in the parish. But then we call that youth ministry, and that's incomplete because what that does is that reduces youth ministry down to just a social club or just a gathering of people. I think one of the most common ways we do this, and especially in this diocese or dioceses where we have confirmation in high school, where parish religious education goes into high school, is that youth ministry can often get absorbed into our high school, 9th and 10th grade faith formation program. It doesn't mean these programs are a bad thing. They're a very good thing. It's important to catechize and to meet the formational needs of our youth. But I think when we have parish programs for 9th and 10th graders, that's for faith formation, and we say, that's what we do for our high schoolers, that's our youth ministry. Youth ministry can sometimes get absorbed into that. And so again, it's not that any of these single elements are a bad thing, but if we just focus on one of those, it really provides an incomplete model of youth ministry. So what Renewing the Vision suggested is 8 different components for a comprehensive youth ministry. So I'll just hit on these really quickly. I'm not going to go into detail with these, but we have advocacy. So, speaking up for youth, speaking on behalf, integrating them into the life of the church by speaking on their behalf. We have catechesis, so faith development, that idea of community life, having a welcoming and engaging atmosphere through different opportunities, activities for youth. We have evangelization, bringing that gospel message to youth, justice and service, having service opportunities for youth, leadership development, forming leaders, pastoral care, and prayer and worship. All these things are great, and I think if we want to have a comprehensive youth ministry program, we have to involve all these in a well-rounded, cohesive method. So I think if we're honestly living out these components, if we're striving to meet those 3 goals, it's really going to go ultimately back to that first goal of renewing the vision. And if we live this first goal out to its perfection, this is really going to encapsulate what youth ministry is all about, empowering young people to live as disciples. And so if you were to ask me, what is youth ministry? How would you define it? Really, to put it simply but completely, we have to go back to that passage we were reading earlier, and specifically from Matthew 28:19, go therefore and make disciples. If we want to do youth ministry correctly, if we want to do youth ministry the way it's supposed to be done, it's as simple as this. It's making disciples. And I think when we're thinking about vision, when we're thinking about what youth ministry looks like, this has to be at the forefront. This has to be central to our vision. So how do we do this? How do we go out and make disciples, build disciples for Jesus Christ? So I want to start by looking at the General Directory of Catechesis, number 38. And this is really introducing how God really builds that idea of discipleship with humanity. So it says, God in his greatness uses pedagogy to reveal himself to the human person. He uses human events and words to communicate his plan. He does so progressively and in stages so as to draw even closer to man. God, in fact, operates in such a manner that man comes to knowledge of his salvific plan by means of the events of salvation history and the inspired words which accompany them. So 2 things I want to point out. I really like this quote, and there's 2 reasons why. First of all, when God works with humanity, and specifically when he sends Jesus Christ to the world, we look there at the end, he talks about accompaniment, inspired words which accompany and explain them. God does so by means of accompaniment. And then if we look in that second line, he does so progressively and in stages. And I think when we look at discipleship, this is what discipleship is all about. When we're dealing with young people, it has to be by a means of accompaniment. And it's not like a dead sprint of accompaniment, but it's also not like, let's just sit down and be complacent. It's something that's done slowly, progressively, and in stages. It's a means in which we walk with the youth that we're serving. So I want to introduce this idea of the 4 stages of discipleship. 4 stages of discipleship. So I think when we're looking at our youth ministry programs, when we're trying to come up with a vision, ultimately that goal is discipleship, right? It's getting youth to be disciples. But how do we get there? Because it'd be great if we're starting with all of our teens are just on fire for the Lord, but we know that's probably not the case. Maybe we have 1 or 2, and that's great. That would fit in that stage of discipleship. But for the most part, and we know the typical teens we're dealing with, teenagers, families. When we look at our parish communities, the majority of those who are in our parish are not attending Mass, are not involved in the parish in any way. And so how do we reach out to those people? How do we walk a teen through all these stages and ultimately get them into discipleship? And so when we're creating a youth ministry program, when we're structuring it, we have to have 2 things in mind when we're thinking about these stages. First, we have to be able to identify where our teens are at. Some teens are on fire, some teens are nowhere near that, and then there's teens in between. And so when we identify our teens, we have to create our programs, events, whatever we're doing, whatever means we're using to accompany our youth. We have to do so recognizing those stages that they're in and creating opportunities that are appropriate for each stage. So I'm going to walk through these stages, and I'm going to first of all present them just in a theoretical, conceptual way. What do I mean by that? I'm going to offer a few examples, and then I'm going to give kind of a theoretical example of what this looks like in practice, using a hypothetical teenager who could potentially go through these stages. So let's start with the stage of pre-evangelization. So with the stage of pre-evangelization, I have this scripture verse from Luke 5:29-31. The Pharisees and their scribes complained to him, saying, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus said to them in reply, "Those who are healthy do not need a physician, but the sick do." And I like this scripture verse because I think it encapsulates this word enculturation. When Christ comes to disciple us, the first thing he does, he doesn't, stay off in some distant place and wait for humanity to come to him. No, he goes out to where the people are. He eats and drinks with the sinners and tax collectors, because he says in that last line, those who are healthy do not need a physician, but the sick do. And I think when we're dealing with youth, we have to, and we know this, first and foremost, we have to meet them where they're at. We have to provide them that moment of first evangelization. So what am I talking about by this? Well, I think this is when we engage a teenager on that social and community level, right? The teenagers that would fall into this category are like your typical teens who don't want to be there, and we know who they are. Whether it's in your religious ed program or if you look around at Mass, the teens that don't want to be there and maybe are forced to because of one reason or another. Or maybe it's the teens that aren't there, that don't want to be there and aren't there because there's no encouragement from the family. These are the teens that are unchurched, that may not have any sort of faith life at home or apart from the parish community. So how do we reach them? Well, we have to start with opportunities that engage that social aspect, right? So some examples of this could be like our CYO sports teams, maybe those sort of fun social events like laser tag night or bowling, movie nights, whatever they may be. So I want to give you guys like a hypothetical scenario of what this looks like. So let's say we have this kid. We'll call him Tyler, and Tyler is about as far as you can be from an active member of the parish community. Tyler is like, he's really struggling. He's an atheist. He has no belief in God. He thinks religion is just stupid. And so how do you reach Tyler, right? Well, there's some things about Tyler. He has interests just like any other teenager. And in this scenario, Tyler plays on the baseball team. And there's another guy who plays on the baseball team. His name is Joey. And Joey is like one of your all-star kids at the parish. He comes from a really solid family. He's growing in his faith. He would be in like that 4th discipleship stage, which we're going to talk about in a second. But because we've been working with Joey and evangelizing to him, we've empowered him to be able to go out and to begin that conversation with others. And so he plays on the baseball team with Tyler. And so Joey's looking ahead to the summer, and he's talking to Tyler, and he's like, "Hey, Tyler, my church, we have this volleyball team that plays in this league over the summer, and like we're really bad. Like we need some athletic people, and Tyler's like, oh, are you gonna ask me to be on that church volleyball team? And Joey's like, yeah, man, we need some people to help us out. And hey, I have like this awesome youth minister who after every game takes us out for ice cream. And so Joey like talks Tyler into joining this pairs volleyball team. And without Tyler realizing it, he's entered into that pre-evangelization stage of ministry, where he's beginning to have that first moment of church, that first moment of evangelization through the community. And so he comes, maybe he doesn't come to all the games, but he comes to a good majority of them. He has fun. And in the process, he starts to meet other kids on the team, maybe other kids who are involved in the youth ministry program. And he begins to have a good experience of what church is like, this sense of community. And this leads to this question, what is church? What is this community all about? And so that, so let's say we get through the summer and they're at the very last volleyball game, and Joey's talking to Tyler and he's like, hey, I've been noticing that you've been having like a good time, meeting a lot of friends. We have this youth group that meets throughout the year. We're kicking it off in a few weeks. We're gonna have this cornhole tournament. I need a partner to play on my team. The winner gets like a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. There's no commitment. You don't have to. It's not like one of those weird groups or anything like that. And so Tyler agrees to go to that, and in the sense has begun to kind of transition from that pre-evangelization stage into the stage of evangelization and catechesis, which is stage number 2. So what do I mean by this stage? Well, this stage, and I'll use that verse from Mark. He began to teach by the sea. A very large crowd gathered around him, so that he got into a boat on the sea and sat down, and the whole crowd was beside the sea on land. And he taught them at length in parables. And so the key part about this is the word teach and taught. This is where once we've kind of softened the teen and built that trust, that we can begin to open up the gospel, begin to walk with the teenager from that experience of community and church to really what is catechesis, what is evangelization, leading them to that question of who do these teachings come from? So the teens that would begin to fall in this category are maybe those kids who do want to be there, who come on a regular basis. Maybe they're not like super into their faith, but they've enjoyed that sense of community, that they've been softened enough to want to be at different events and programs that you're offering. The way we reach them, the types of events that this would entail, basically, I would call this like your staple youth ministry event or gathering. Now, I want to pause right there for a second, because at the end of in the last couple of workshops later on this year, we're going to be talking about certain methods. So if you're wondering, like, how do we put together these events and what do these actually look like, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of that. Right now, we're just talking conceptually, what is this all about? And even these stages, I don't expect that tomorrow or even in the next year that we're going to implement all these things, but really just giving us a big picture of what this is about. And, if we're looking 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, what a complete youth ministry would look like. So your staple youth ministry program, this is going to be like a consistent gathering that's going to happen. So maybe it's like your once a month, or even if you're really ambitious, once a week, like Sunday night, Wednesday night, whatever that may be, youth group gathering. And there's a lot of different ways we can do this. Again, we're going to talk about that in methods later on in the program. But the point of these gatherings is to hit on the social, but transition a teen into that evangelization catechetical, to really leave them with a taste of the spiritual that's going to get them to want to go in deeper into these stages of discipleship. So what does this mean in our hypothetical scenario? So so we got Tyler again. He's been invited to attend the youth ministry kickoff night by his friend Joey. And so Tyler goes, he sees a lot of the same people that were on the volleyball team. Him and Joey win the cornhole championship. He gets like this Dunkin' Donuts gift card. And then at the close of the night, you as the youth minister are giving some closing announcements. And one of the things you say is, hey, if you're looking to grow deeper, not just in your faith, but to understand, what is the meaning of what we do? What is the meaning of our community? What is the meaning of church? What is the meaning of life? We invite you to participate in these gatherings. It's not something that you have to go to every single thing, but come and join us, experience this community, maybe have some great food, have some fun games that we play, and dive deeper into this stuff. So Tyler decides he's going to start trying to come to this once a month youth group gathering that's at Joey's parish. And again, maybe he doesn't make all of them, but maybe he makes like half of them. And he has some good conversations with people. He begins to dive deeper into, these teachings of the church. And again, maybe he's not agreeing with everything yet, or maybe he's not understanding, or maybe he's not still even believing that, but he's beginning to dive deeper until he's faced with the question, okay, I know what this community is. I see what the church is, but these teachings of this love that people have, who does it come from? And this leads us to our third stage of discipleship, which is prayer and spirituality. So we'll read this verse from John chapter 9, verse 10 through 11. So they said to him, "So how were your eyes open?" He replied, "The man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went there and washed, and I was able to see." This is really the point in discipleship. The stage, I would say, in discipleship where we're providing teenagers with an opportunity to encounter Jesus Christ through prayer and through the sacraments. So the teenagers that we're typically going to see in this one are the ones who are wanting to go deeper, the ones who are wanting to develop an actual prayer life, the ones who are wanting to really encounter God. And so this can happen through devotions, through the sacraments. Maybe it's through a retreat experience. Maybe it's through going to Steubenville, whatever they may be. And sometimes it's those powerful event encounters. Maybe it's like a more gradual process. But whatever it is, it should lead us to the question: okay, I've experienced the community of the church. I see this is who it's from. Do I want to commit my life as a disciple to Jesus Christ? So we'll return to the scenarios for a second. So we have Tyler, who's been going to youth group, and now it's the springtime. He's been going to youth group every now and then. He seems to be growing in his spiritual journey into his knowledge of what is kind of the meaning of life. And so you recognize this as a youth minister, and so you approach Tyler and say, "Hey, Tyler, it seems like you're really hungering for what's deeper." Over the summer, our youth group goes on this awesome trip called the Steubenville East Youth Conference. It's a really powerful journey, really powerful experience. Would you like to join our group? And so Tyler grows. He has this profound experience, and as a youth minister, you recognize that are able to follow up with him, invite him to, maybe it's like a Bible study or discipleship group that takes place after this. Again, we're going to talk about all these possibilities and methods later on, but it's presenting him with a question. Okay, I've experienced this. I know it's real. I know it's authentic. Do I want to commit my life to Jesus Christ as a disciple? And so this really leads to what we're trying to get youth to do, and that's discipleship. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." And at once they left their nets and followed him. So this is, once we have teenagers at this stage, it's giving them that opportunity of leadership among their youth, among other youth at the parish, but also just in the parish in general, incorporating them into the life, mission, and work of our parish communities. And so these are the 4 stages of discipleship. Now, again, I want to go back to say, this isn't something that we're going to be implementing tomorrow or next month or even over the course of the next year. This is something that is probably going to take a few years to develop. Here's kind of just an example. I would say at minimum, it's probably 3 years to establish and develop a comprehensive youth ministry program. The first year that we're really gearing for right now in this program is going to be mainly dealing with those first 2 steps, that pre-evangelization and evangelization and catechesis step. So I have outlined here a sample of kind of what these years would look like, but this year it's going to be more of developing a core team of adults to help you run a simple youth ministry program. And through that youth ministry program, identifying something that's consistent, and identifying maybe those core group of teens. Maybe it's only like 5 teenagers that are coming, but knowing who those teens are, and then with them possibly identifying maybe like 1 or 2 who you can see in maybe that 4th stage or that 3rd stage of discipleship that you can really empower and build upon. And so the first year is really just about establishment. The second year is once we've established something simple, is to really grow from that. Grow with your adults. Take those teens who you've been working with and empower them to go and really recruit and disciple others to come into the program. Empowering parents, finding those key parents. We love to talk about the parents who who don't come to anything or are really difficult, but we always know that there's always going to be those few parents that are involved, are on fire for their faith, and want their kids to be involved. And so I think identifying them and building off of them, discipling them to where really it's 3, and I'd say at a minimum more like between 3, 4, year 5, is having this comprehensive, cohesive program that involves all these stages of discipleship. So I know that's a lot of information, and the point of this first session isn't to overwhelm, because again, this is going to be a step-by-step process. After today, the goal isn't just to go and take all these things and run with it and just get started. But the goal of it really is to start thinking about what is your vision of youth ministry. So in your handouts, you have a sheet that says talks about creating the vision, and it creates a vision based on these 4 stages of discipleship that we're talking about. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at that sheet, and there's 3 questions that are involved with each stage. The first question is, what's going on at the parish right now that maybe meets teens at those stages? Is there any events? And maybe there's not, and that's okay. The second question is, what teens can you identify now that may fall into that stage? And again, that one may be blank as well. You may be, if you're brand new to this, you may be looking at all 4 of these boxes, and the first 2 questions are going to be blank, and that's totally okay. We're going to be walking through this together, and as time goes on, really building upon that and hopefully filling in some of those things. But that third question in each box is really what's going to formulate your initial and very general vision of what youth ministry is going to look like. So what are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your goals for teens in each of those stages? And when I say that, I don't mean like for you to think about what are the nuts and bolts, what types. It's not going to be thinking of what types of events am I going to do here, or what retreats am I going to be doing here, but more so like what is your general hope for teenagers in your parish in these stages. So I'll give you a quick sample vision of what I have here, just to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. So we're talking about sample vision. Here's what I have here: youth ministry at Saint whatever, Our Lady of whatever it may be, is aimed at building disciples of Jesus Christ by accompanying young people in the following ways. And I basically have 4 bullet points that really meet up with those 4 stages of evangelization. And these are very general points: providing a safe and engaging community, meeting those formational needs, leading youth to an authentic encounter with Jesus Christ, and finally giving them an opportunity to commit themselves as disciples. And maybe this is what your vision looks like, and that's totally okay. But what I want you to do with this is I want you to take those boxes that we have in that creative vision sheet, and I want you to answer those questions. And then you have another sheet that has some action steps that we're going to do from this. And one of the questions has a box where you're going to insert a vision. And again, these are just your initial thoughts. These don't have to be, married in stone or anything like that, but it's your initial thoughts of a vision, and it's going to get filled in and expanded upon as we're going to go through this program. So where are we going from here? Well, a few things. Again, we're not trying to tackle the whole world in this first session, but really kind of get us started thinking about that idea of vision. And what I want you to do is the first thing is schedule a meeting with your pastor. Take these thoughts that you're writing down here and take them to that meeting. And the first thing I want you to ask your pastor is, what is your vision for youth ministry for our parish? What do you want to see? Maybe share with him those stages of discipleship. Share with him some of your thoughts. And really what this is going to do is going to launch us into the next thing, which is the next session. That's assessing the needs of our parish communities. Now, another thing you're going to want to do in that meeting with your pastor, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in the next session, is I want you to ask your pastor if he's okay with this, to see if you can set up a weekend where you can speak at all of the masses. Now, important note, if he does agree to let you do that, and this is only going to be like a 3-4 minute thing, make sure that weekend isn't until after session 2, because in session 2 we're going to talk about what that sort of talk would entail. What are those things you want to hit upon? Because really what that's going to do is that's going to kind of kick off that second phase, which is assessment. And in the assessment phase, it's going to first of all be presenting our vision of youth ministry, our initial vision to the parish community, in an effort to begin to gain different ideas, different thoughts, different information. That's going to take place through surveys, through meetings, through a lot of different forms, and we're going to talk about that at session 2. But really, it's an opportunity to say, here's what my vision is. What is your vision as parish parents? What are your vision? Other adults, youth at the parish, what is your vision? What do you want to see from youth ministry? Through this assessment process, we're going to get 2 things. We're going to hopefully get some valuable information, but also we're going to begin to identify maybe who some of those key people are, some of those key people who could serve on a core team, some of those key parents, maybe even some of those key teenagers. And through that, maybe begin to identify between teenagers and even families what stages of discipleship they are at. That's going to lead us into session 3, which is going to talk about building that core team of adult leaders who are going to help us run and facilitate our youth ministry program. The core team, and we're going to talk about in that 3rd session, has a lot of different layers, a lot of different roles and responsibilities, and there's a structure to the core team that we're going to want to look at. Those first 3 sessions really lay that initial groundwork. Sessions 4 and 5, like I was saying earlier, are going to deal with methodology. So first, looking big picture, if we're looking over the course of our first year, what does a year in youth ministry look like? How often do we meet? What types of youth gatherings do we have? And then we're going to kind of zoom in and talk about specific gatherings. How do we plan those gatherings? How do we plan a kickoff night? What are some methods we use when we're planning youth gatherings? We're going to talk about communication techniques, social media, flock note, different types of ways in which we can reach our parents. And then once we've kind of built that initial skeleton structure of how we're going to do youth ministry in our first year, over the summer there's going to be an opportunity for training for you and your team, so that by the time the fall rolls around, we'll begin to really dive deeper into youth ministry. So that's pretty much all I have today for session 1. Again, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, I'm going to leave a slide up here at the very end. That's going to have, and if you don't have it already, it's going to have my email address and number at the office. Definitely feel free to call me at any time, send me an email, because I'm here to support you and help you in whatever you need. So even if that's just chatting, if that's meeting with you and your pastor, any assistance at all, I'm happy to do that. But so again, going forward from this session, take a second just to have that meeting with your pastor, to begin to think about that idea of vision, because we're going to be building off of that a lot as we go forward. So again, I thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you for session 2, which will be at the end of March. There'll be, once again, those 2 options, a daytime option at the Chancery and an evening option at the House of Studies. And hopefully you can make those. I really encourage you to. If not, we're going to try to do another video for those. But yeah, with the in-person sessions, there's a lot of opportunity for discussion, for feedback, and especially as we go through the program, to chat with other people of how that process is going for them. So if you can, please make that. But if not, we'll try to make another video available. But again, thanks guys for joining us, and have a great day. We'll be praying for you in your ministries, and please pray for all of us as well. Have a great day, and God bless.